Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Sukkah Daf Yizayin begins with a Mishnah which introduces the topic of how much space you're allowed to have between the schach horizontally to the walls. That means from the top of the wall extending horizontally towards where the schach begins, how much space can you have there? There are two types of space which we are discussing here. One is if it's just empty space, and one is if it's filled with something which is not kosher schach. Now, as far as not kosher schach, the Gemara will show that there are two ways to understand it. It could either be viewed as a not kosher schach, just and the as simple as that, and the issue will be how much not kosher schach you're allowed to have before you passel the entire sukkah, or it could be viewed as a bent wall. That'll be a machlokes. The Gemara will expand on that machlokes amoraim, how to understand the Mishnah, bring proofs either way, and then have another version of who the people involved in the machlokes are. So let's begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches two halachos. One is where you have space, empty airspace between the wall horizontally to the beginning of the schach, and over there the Mishnah says the shear is clearly 3 tvachim. If you have less than 3 tvachim, it's within a shear lavud, that is the size that's considered to be closed halachically. We view it as if it's closed, and the sukkah is fine, the schach connects to the wall, and it's kosher. If it's more than 3 tvachim, empty space, there's nothing else to discuss, it's more than lavud, you have the schach does not relate to the wall, and therefore it's not a kosher wall. If you have that on all the walls, you don't have any walls, it would be a puzzle sukkah. As far as the schach's connection to this wall, it doesn't exist. Now the Mishnah turns its attention to what happens where you have a puzzle schach there. It's filled in, but with material that doesn't count as a kosher schach. And here the Mishnah says the shear is 4 amos. And it gives 3 examples of this halacha. The 3 examples of this halacha are if you have a house, and the ceiling falls in the middle, and you fill it in with schach. Now you have kosher schach where the hole was, and you have pasul schach and the rest of the ceiling extending from the schach to the walls of the house. If it's 4 amos, then it is pasul. If it is less than 4 amos, it's kosher. 4 amos here is the shear, not 3 tvachim, but 4 amos. Same halacha would apply if you have an area of echsadras in a courtyard. Now Rashi describes at length here the way a courtyard was built in the days of Chazal was that there were a number of houses that surrounded the courtyard, such that the courtyard was walled by houses on all sides. Each house opened into the courtyard. Now they would often build an echsadra. An echsadra is a roofed structure without walls, like a portico of sorts. They would build that directly in front of the house. Now, if you imagine what happened here, all the people in the chutzner, which were surrounding the houses, closed in the chutzner on all 4 sides, and each house built an echsadra in front of the house. So it comes out that you have a square of houses. Within that, you have a square of echsadras, of roofs. And then within that, you have an open space, meaning the echsadras didn't fill the chutzner. There was an open space in the middle that was open to the sky. Now, that open space, let's say you covered it with schach. So what do you end up having? You have the same scenario as we had earlier with a hole in the roof. You have an area in the center that's roofed with kosher schach, and all around it you have the roofs of the echsadra, which are not kosher schach. But those echsadras meet the walls of the houses, which form walls around the entire chutzner. So again, here the Mishnah says, the halacha is if the echsadra roofs are 4 amos or more, it's pasul. And if they are less, then from the schach to the walls of the houses is less than 4 amos, then the schach is considered to connect to the walls of the houses, and it's kosher schach. And the third example of this is if you have a regular sukkah, you built a sukkah, and you roofed it partially with schach and partially with pasul schach, as long as the edges of the pasul schach close to the walls are less than 4 amos, the schach that's in the middle that's kosher is considered to connect to the walls, and everything is fine. Now, that concludes the Mishnah. The simple understanding of the Mishnah, before we see the Gemara will say that it's a machlokes, but the simple understanding that we start with in the Mishnah is that the reason that there's a shear of 4 amos when it's pasul schach is because you consider it to be a bent wall. You have the dofen akum halacha, where if you have pasul schach, you can view it as if the wall bends, it goes up on the sides, then it bends vertically into the ceiling. It's all considered wall, and it connects to the kosher schach. If you have more than 4 amos, that's too much to be the horizontal part of a bent wall. Up till under 4 amos, you can say dofen akuma. More than 4 amos more, you cannot. So Gemara asks, why do you have to be the same halacha 4 times? Gemara says, in each time it's a bigger chiddush that you could say the halacha of the dofen akuma, that the pasul schach is considered to be part of the wall. The first case was where you have a house, and a regular house, and the ceiling fell in the middle. So there, the ceiling is literally built as part of the house. The ceiling and the walls are both part of the house. It makes sense to say that the ceiling near the wall is part of the wall. It's a bent part of the wall itself. However, in the case of the Achsadra was built as a freestanding roofed structure. It was not meant to connect to the walls of the house, and you may say, therefore, the walls of the house don't form a Daif and Akuma together with the Achsadra that's near it. The Gemara says, no, the Chiddush here, the Mishnah is that even though it was not built to work together as a house and a ceiling, it is still considered to be a Daif and Akuma. Now the Chiddush in the third case is, over there, it's not made with kosher schach. The Gemara explains as follows. The first two cases could be that the schach that you were using was really kosher schach material. It was just puzzle because you didn't build it to be a sukkah. It wasn't that the schach was puzzle, it was that the sukkah was puzzle. In the first case, it could be that the ceiling of the house was made out of beams of wood that are kosher schach material. The second case, the roof of the Achsadra could also have made of beams of wood that was kosher schach material. The only reason that those two things are puzzle is because the ceiling you built to be a ceiling of a house, not to be a sukkah, and the Achsadra you built to be an Achsadra, not to be a sukkah. The third case, however, you built it to be a sukkah. You just used puzzle schach. So you may think, well, you built it to be a sukkah and you use puzzle schach, that's worse. You cannot connect to the walls. This is supposed to be schach, and it's not supposed to be walls. Therefore, the Mishnah has to teach me the same halacha 3 times, and all of them you could say the Daif and Akuma halacha. Now, up to now we've been assuming that the reason that this 4 Mashir is because it's the halacha of a bent wall of the Daif and Akuma. If that would be the case, what would be the halacha if the area of Pasal Schach was not flush to the wall? It was in the center of the sukkah somewhere, not close to the wall. And you would not apply the 4 Amma halacha there. So Gemara says that's the opinion of the Rabbanon de Beirav. They said, if you're not near the wall, then the shear of a Pasal Schach is not 4 Amas, it's 4 Tfachim. If you have 4 Tfachim or more of Pasal Schach somewhere in the middle of your Schach ceiling, it passes the entire sukkah. It breaks up the sukkah, and you do not have an adequate sukkah there. Now, that's their opinion. The Gemara says that Rabbah heard them say that, and he challenged it, and he said, what do you mean? Look in our Mishnah, the shear is obviously 4 Amas. So they said the shear there is 4 Amas. That's because that's a Daif and Akuma. This is not a Daif and Akuma. And he said, no, there's nothing to do with Daif and Akuma. This is a shear, this is the standard shear of 4 Tvachim, not because of the Daif and Akuma. And anywhere in the sukkah, the shear is always, this is the standard shear of 4 Amas. Correction, anywhere around the sukkah, the shear is 4 Amas. Nothing to do with the halacha of the Daif and Akuma. And the same shear applies everywhere around the sukkah. 4 Amas is the minimum size of Pasal Schach. 4 Amas will pasal your sukkah. Less than 4 Amas of Pasal Schach, your sukkah is still kosher. Now, both Rabbah and the Rabbanon de Beirav agree that the shear for Pasal Schach is bigger than the shear for empty air. The shear for empty air, that's what we said in the Mishnah, is 3 Tvachim. The shear for Pasal Schach, according to the Rabbanon de Beirav, is 4 Tvachim, and according to Rabbah, is 4 Amos. So, therefore, it comes out that empty space is more machmir, it's more chomor, than Pasal Schach as far as passeling the sukkah. This passes with 3 Tvachim, and empty space passes with 3 Tvachim, and Pasal Schach only passes with 4 Tvachim before Amos. So now, Rabbah says he has a kashi. So what if you have less than a shear of Pasal Schach next to less than a shear of empty space? That is, let's say you have, let's go with the opinion of the Rabbanon de Beirav. Let's say you have 3 Tvachim of Pasal Schach, right next to it you have 2 Tvachim of empty space. Altogether you have 5 Tvachim of no good stuff. But they won't work together, because they're not mitzdaref to each other, because you do not have a minimum size psul of either of them. You only have 3 Tvachim of Pasal Schach, and you only have 2 Tvachim of empty space. Says Rabbah, now what's going to happen if you go and you fill in the empty space with Pasal Schach now? Now you can have 5 Tvachim of Pasal Schach, you'll pasal the sukkah. Says Rabbah, it comes out a funny thing. It comes out that empty space is better than Pasal Schach, because as long as you had 2 Tvachim of empty space next to the 3 Tvachim of Pasal Schach, the sukkah was fine. You didn't have a minimum share of psul of either Pasal Schach or empty space. Now you fill in the empty space with Pasal Schach, now you have 5 Tvachim of Pasal Schach, the whole sukkah is pasal. But it can't be, says Rabbah, it doesn't make sense according to you, that the empty space is a lighter halacha than the Pasal Schach, because Pasal Schach has a bigger shear. It should have a lighter halacha than the empty space. So Gemara says that the Rabbanan the Beraf said back to him, you cast the same kash on yourself, just use a shear of 4 amos instead of 4 tfachim. Yeah, if you had slightly less than 4 amos, and next to it, let's say you had 23 tvachim, which is 1 tefach less than 4 amos, and you had 23 tvachim of empty space of pasel schach, and next to that you had 2 tvachim of empty space. If you fill in those 2 tvachim with pasel schach, you'll have now a shear of pasel schach that's greater than 4 amos, and you'll pasel the whole thing. But it can't be. How could pasel schach be worse than empty space? So he says, no. You don't understand my kasha. My kasha is as follows. According to you, it doesn't make sense. According to me, it makes a lot of sense. Because according to me, there's 2 different shiurim here. The shear of pasel schach and the shear of empty space is 2 different shiurim. A minimum size is given. This is given a size of 3 tvachim, and this is given a size of 4 amos, 2 different shiurim. The rule is, any measurements that aren't the same don't combine. Any 2 things that have halachos, let's say the minimum size of a material to be makabel toma. So different materials have different shiurim, they don't combine because they have different shiurim. But according to you, this is not about a shear. It's not that there's a size of pasel schach and there is a size of empty space. According to you, the halacha is just that you need to have a reshus. You need to have a length of space within the sukkah that's significant. Why do you say that? Because according to the Rabbanan de Beirav, the shear is 4 tvachim of pasel schach. Where does that shear 4 tvachim come from? Because that is a significant reshus. That's considered to be a chashuva place. So then he says it shouldn't make a difference to you whether it's empty space or pasel schach. It should either way combine to a 4 tefach wide space, a chashuva space, a reshus, which is not kosher sukkah. So according to you, there's no reason that the pasel schach and the empty space shouldn't combine to a minimum size to mess up the entire sukkah. According to me, it's a shear. A shear was given. Maybe it's halachah Moshe Misinai, different shear. You can't combine them. According to you, it's just about having a wide enough chashuv place that has no kosher schach over it, so the 2 should combine. So the Gemara here says that Abaye stepped in now, and he said that according to you, Rabbah, it's really not much better, because you also have a circumstance in which the 2 things have the same shear. What's that? Let's say you have a sukkah that's exactly 7 tvachim. 7 tvachim is the minimum size. You have exactly 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. So there, the sukkah would be kosher if you have schach over slightly more than 4 tvachim. Because you'll have 4 tvachim, and the space, the empty space that's left, is just under 4 tvachim, and that could be considered lavud. If you have exactly 3 tvachim of empty space, there would be pasel, and if you have 3 tvachim of pasel schach, would also be pasel there, because you don't have a shear of lavud, and you need 7 tvachim of schach. The only way you could consider this sukkah to be kosher is if you could halachically view it as if you have 7 tvachim of schach. You don't. You only have 4 tvachim of schach. If you have a slightly more than 4 tvachim, I could say, listen, lavud from my kosher schach to the wall of the sukkah, it's all considered to be kosher schach, and therefore it's halachically viewed as if I have 7 tvachim of kosher schach. However, if you have 3 tvachim of pasel schach or 3 tvachim of airspace, that messes up your lavud, and now your sukkah is pasel. So therefore, in this circumstance, both if you have empty space and if you have pasel schach, it'll mess up your lavud, and the whole sukkah, you won't have 7 tvachim of kosher schach, and the whole sukkah will be pasel. So you see, there are some situations, says Abaye to Rabbah, in which you also agree that the shear is 3 tvachim. So Rabbah answered, listen, obviously that's not about the shear. It's not that there's a different shear. I'm talking to you about shear. I'm saying that if the shear is different, it has different halachas, they don't combine. This is not a question of shear. Here, the problem is you'll have a sukkah that's too small. But it's not a shear issue. Okay, now the Gemara says that Rabbah was asked, is it true, are you really so sure that any time 2 different materials or 2 different things have different shiurim, they don't combine? I'll show you a place where they do combine. It's talking about the minimum size cloth that's makabel tumas zav moishav. If a zav sits on something, which is designed to be sat on, he makes it tameh. Even if he didn't touch it, he makes it tameh. Now, different types of materials have a minimum size that they're meant to be sat on. Cloth, a cloth to be sat on, minimum size to be useful to be sat on is 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim. Sacking, sackcloth is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. Leather is 5 tvachim by 5 tvachim, and a reed mat is 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. Yet we see that each size combines with the size. Each material combines with the size with the material that has a size directly above it, such that cloth combines with sack, but not with anything else. sack combines with skin, with leather, and leather combines with reeds. But what we see from here is that they do combine, even though they have different shiurim, they do combine. So it's a kasha on Rabbah who says that different materials that have different shiurim don't combine. So Rabbah says that's different. It's different because there is a way in which they do have the same halacha. What is that? If you make a nicely shaped, rounded out, and designed, professionally finished square of cloth of any of these materials, then it is makabel tumah, even if it's only one tefach by one tefach. So in that circumstance, and in that sense, it is makabel tumah, and therefore they have the same size, and therefore they are mitzvah if they do combine to each other. So it says one square tefach. What's that useful for? So Rish Lakish says, name of Rav Yanai, it's useful to sit on the donkey. You use it as a saddle of sorts, or if there's a hole in the saddle, you use it to fill the hole in the saddle. It has a function. Okay. Now this is the first version of this entire machlokes between Rabbah and the Rabbanon de Rav. Now, this is the version that they had it in Surah. The Gemara says in Nahardah, they did not have it as a machlokes between Rav, that's Rabbanon de Rav, so they're representing Rav. They did not have it as a machlokes between Rav and Rabbah. That is a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Because Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, like what the Rabbanon de Rav said in the original version, the Surah version, he said that the shear of Arbamas only works because of the Daifen Akuma, but the minimum size of Pasal Schach to mess up the Sukkah is 4 Tfachim if it's not next to the wall. And Rav said, like what Rabbah said, that no, it's 4 Amas, whether it's on the side of the ceiling, the side of the schach near the wall, or it's in the middle, it's always 4 amas. And then the Gemara says we have a couple of kash there. First of all, we have a Mishnah that says clearly, if somebody used boards in a sukkah that are at least 4 tefachim, that are 4 tefachim wide, it's kosher. So the Gemara says, why should this be? Why should boards of 4 tefachim wide be kosher? According to Rav, it's very good, because it's not too wide to pasel the sukkah. Even if you view the boards as pasel schach because of the halacha of gzeras tikra, we're afraid that people are going to get confused and use it as a house, and therefore we pasel boards. But so fine, you have a board 4 tefachim wide. It's kosher anyway. The board is pasel, the rest of it is fine. But according to Shmuel, that 4 tefachim is the shear in the middle of the sukkah. Why is this kosher? So Gemara says very simple. We're talking about where the board was on the side, and there the shear is 4 amas. Okay, the Gemara says we have another kasha. And there's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda, as we've seen for a few daf. Is there a concern of gzeras tikra? Do we ask you to use a board which is too wide? According to Rav, the machlokes is in a case where the board is 4 tefachim wide or more. That Rabbi Meir says it is pasel. If it's 4 tefachim wide, and Rabbi Huda says no, not a problem. So Gemara brings a price where Rabbi Meir says that 2 boards next to each other combine to add up to this shear of 4 tefachim. So Gemara says that according to the version of Rav, that Rav is according to the version of the machlokes, the Rav is the one who says that the shear of the psul is 4 tefachim. This doesn't make any sense. Because if the boards are less than 4 tefachim each, it's kosher schach. How can they combine to make a psul? Each one is fine. Rav holds that the only time Reb Meir says that a board is pasel schach is if it's 4 tefachim or more. So we must be talking about where the boards are 4 tefachim. But if they're 4 tefachim, so then according to the version that Rav is the one who said that 4 tefachim is pasel anywhere in the sukkah, so it means that the sukkah is already problematic. Why do the 2 boards have to combine to make a problem? They're already a problem. 4 tefachim itself is enough of a psul. So the Gemara answers, we're talking about where it's on the side again, and there the shear is 4 amas. Where in the version of Rav that 4 tefachim is a psul in the middle, on the side 4 amas is a psul. So we're talking about on the side near the wall. You have Zayf and Akuma. We're talking about having them combined to be a shear 4 amas. We're not talking about having them combined to be a shear 4 tefachim. The Gemara brings one final proof, and it's a statement of Rabbi Meir referring to all types of pasel schach, and arguing on Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Meir says that if there's space between the pasel schach equal to the size of the pasel schach itself, it's kosher, assuming if you fill in that space with branches with kosher schach. Gemara says Now, 4 tefach board is a type of pasel schach, and yet Rabbi Meir says that if you have spaces between all these 4 tefach boards, it's kosher. But how does that work? That means you have a 4 tefach board somewhere in the middle of the sukkah. You have 4 tefachim wide of pasel schach somewhere in the middle. How is that okay? According to the opinion that says that the shear is 4 tefachim in the middle of the sukkah. Gemara says we're talking about where the sukkah is exactly 8 amas wide, and then therefore both sides of the sukkah are within 4 amas to the middle, or within 4 amas to the side. You could say the Deifan Akuma halacha on every part of the sukkah because it's all within 4 amas of the side wall. The reason that it has to be that the spaces are equal to the boards is because that way, if it's organized in an alternating pasel schach, kasher schach, pasel schach, kasher schach, pasel schach, kasher schach, starting from both ends, you'll end up with the middle 2 sets of 4 tefachim being both kasher schach. You'll go pasel kasher, and from the other side, pasel kasher. The 2 middle ones are both kasher. And therefore you'll have 8 tefachim together that's kosher, so you'll have enough to present the middle size, you'll have enough in the middle to be a minimum size of a sukkah. Minimum size of a sukkah is 7 tefachim of kosher schach, and here you have 8 tefachim of kosher schach.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.